I now have the privilege of introducing Dr. Rosa Corcoy, who will be providing additional insight to time and range and HbA1c targets in pregnant women with type 1 diabetes. Dr. Rosa Corcoy is the director of the Diabetes Unit at Hospital de la Santa Cruz y Sant Pau and associate professor of medicine at the Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona. Dr. Corcoy's main areas of interest are endocrinological conditions in pregnancy, type 1 diabetes, and technology and diabetes. She is author and co-author of 180 publications in peer-reviewed journals. She has received the 2012 Jorgen Pedersen Medal of the EASD Diabetes Pregnancy Study Group. We are excited to have Dr. Corcoy with us today. So let's get started. Dr. Corcoy.
Thank you very much, Denise, for the introduction. I want to join Professor Feig and Claire Meek in expressing my gratitude to the organizers of the Time in Range ADA initiative for this invitation for this webinar. The title of my presentation is CGM, Time in Range, and Hemoglobin A1c Targets in Pregnant Women with Type 1 Diabetes. So for the second part, we move from the first part where Dr. Meek analyzed the predictive ability of different glucose biomarkers for pregnancy outcomes, and where these glucose biomarkers were expressed as continuous variables. For the current exercise, we will just focus on two of these biomarkers, time in range and hemoglobin A1c, and express them not as continuous variables, but as we usually do in clinical practice, as those women fulfilling a specific predefined goal. As for CGM targets, we have these specific pregnancy targets defined in the recommendations of the International Consensus Time in Range in 2019. And the aim is a target range between 3.5 and 7.8 millimole per liter. And the specific aims for time below range would be less than 4% of the time, for time in range more than 70% of the time, and for time above range less than 20%, 25% of the time. As to hemoglobin A1c targets, according to NICE 2020, the guideline for diabetes in pregnancy published this year, both for preconception, first trimester, and throughout pregnancy, the goal would be an hemoglobin A1c lower than 6.5. As to ADA standards of care in 2022 and also in years before, the target would be less than 6.5 in preconception and first trimester, and less than 6.0 in the second and third. Thus, for this ancillary study, the aims were first to examine the CGM-based and ADA hemoglobin A1c target glucose attainment in pregnant women participating in the concept trial. And second, to evaluate the associations between CGM and hemoglobin A1c target attainment with pregnancy outcomes. First, target attainment. Here we have the outcome variables for this analysis, and these are the percentage of women who reach CGM-based target attainment in each trimester, and the percentage of women who met the ADA hemoglobin A1c targets in each trimester, according for both of them to those cutoff that I have mentioned before. This is the study population. In the slide, we can see the flow diagram for participants' inclusion. Some women came from the pregnancy trial, some from the planning pregnancy trial who became pregnant during the study. The potential study population was 249 women. And for those women, we had data for CGM and hemoglobin A1C for both of them. In the first trimester for 221 women, at 24, 25 weeks for 197, and at 34, 35 for 172. I have to mention here that CGM data corresponds to an information of 6 days, that in women in the CGM arm, we're coming from the real-time CGM, and for women in the control arm from retrospective CGM. Here we have the baseline characteristics. In the study population, in the study population, the age was 31 years. Most women were from European origin and had post-secondary education. The BMI was just over the cutoff for overweight. The duration of diabetes was about 17 years, and about half of the women were using an insulin pump. Overall, the characteristics of the study population were very close to those of the potential study group of 249 women. Here we have the average, the summary of the hemoglobin A1C and times in a range throughout pregnancy. The hemoglobin A1C went from 6.8 in the first trimester to 6.3 in the second, and again 6.3 in the third. And we can see that the times in range, 8.3 for time below range the first trimester, 51% time in range in the first trimester again, and 40% time above range in the first trimester. In the second trimester, there were not much changes, but in the third trimester, the times in range were improved. In this slide, we move to those figures for CGM expressed in terms of target achievement. We have the results expressed in absolute numbers of women attaining the targets. In red for women attaining the time below range, in green for women attaining the time in range, and in yellow for women attaining the time above range. And the number in the white square is for those women not attaining any of those ranges. We can see that in the first trimester, the highest number is for women not achieving any of those targets, while in the second and in the third trimester, the highest number is for women attaining the time below range. In this slide, we have the same information as in the one before, but we have added the percentages of achievement of times in range. And in summary, we can see how the best numbers are in the third trimester. About a little more than the half of the women were achieving the goal for time below range, and a little more than a third were achieving the targets for time in range and time above range. I have not mentioned, but in all these slides, the two groups, the two arms of monitoring treatment, both CGM and control groups, are combined. In this slide, what is added is in black squares, is the percentages of women not achieving any of the targets. In the first trimester is about 54%, and this decreases towards the third trimester where it is 6%. And finally, these are the rates of achievement of time of the three targets. The figure is 2.7% in the first trimester, even slightly less in the second, and 17% in the third. And now we move to hemoglobin A1C target achievement. The figures in the first, second, and the third trimester is 20-something. They don't change much. the significance of change across the trimesters is not significant. And this finding may be surprising is because that despite hemoglobin A1C concentration decreased during pregnancy, the target was also more strict in the second and third trimesters, so that the percentage of women achieving the target did not move much. And in this slide, we have again the rates of women attaining the three targets, the target above range, in range, and below range in the three pregnancy periods, the three trimesters. But now they are split according to they belonging to the control or the CGM monitoring arms. We can see that throughout pregnancy, for the three targets and for all the groups, the control and the CGM groups, the percentage of women attaining the targets increased throughout pregnancy. But if we now look at the columns and the comparison between women in the control and CGM arms, in the first trimester and in the second trimester, all the groups, the differences between the groups were non-significant, and they just became significant for the three comparisons at 34 weeks, where the number of women, the percentage of women attaining the targets were higher in real-time CGM groups for the three targets, for time above range, for time in range, and for time below range. Now the same exercise for hemoglobin A1C. And we have to look at the non-dashed cells that correspond to the ADA hemoglobin A1C targets. Again, no differences between the groups in first and second trimesters, and again, a significant difference in the third trimester, where the rate of attainment of the hemoglobin A1C target was higher in the real-time CGM group, 31% versus 17%. Now the association with outcomes. The study population is slightly different than for the previous analysis. The numbers are somewhat smaller, and this is because the study population is limited to those women with pregnancy progressing to 20 weeks or more and with information on the outcomes. This makes a number of 204 in the first trimester, 196 in the second, and 171 in the third. These are the CGM targets and ADA hemoglobin A1C targets that were the outcome variables for the previous analysis. And for the current analysis, these become the exposure variables. For this analysis, the outcomes are pregnancy outcomes, 2 of them maternal, preeclampsia and cesarean section, and 4 of them corresponding to the newborn, preterm birth, LGA, neonatal hypoglycemia, and NICU admission. And in this slide, you can see the rates, and they are very similar to those reported in the main concept publication. In this slide, what is summarized is the bivariate association between these exposure variables implying the exposure to maternal glucose and the 6 pregnancy outcomes. The bars indicate the odds ratio. The red ones for time below range, the green ones for time in range, the yellow ones for time above range, and the violet ones for hemoglobin A1C. The horizontal line indicates an odds ratio of 1. And we have indicated the numbers just for those variables that had a significant association. There were 14 of them. Most of them are for hemoglobin A1C in violet. And we can see that the odds ratio is below 1, meaning that the direction is towards a decreased risk with meeting the goal of hemoglobin A1C. There are also some significant associations in green and in yellow for time in range and time above range, also in the direction of lower risk when meeting the target. But we also have two red associations for time below range, and for neonatal hypoglycemia and for NICU admission, and these are in the direction towards a higher risk when meeting the goal. Now we move to the same analysis, but in a multivariate analysis, where it is adjusted for 9 additional variables, including characteristics such as maternal BMI or diabetes duration. Now the number of significant associations are reduced to 6, 4 of them for hemoglobin A1C, in the direction of a protection of a decreased risk for preterm birth, for LGA, and for neonatal hypoglycemia, and 2 of them for time below range. And intriguingly, the association is towards a higher risk, a higher rate of preeclampsia when meeting the goal for time below range in the first trimester, and for neonatal hypoglycemia when meeting the goal for time below range at 24 weeks. Thus, the conclusions of this analysis would be, first, that concept trial participants had a low rate of CGM and hemoglobin A1C target attainment, especially for the trimester-specific ADA hemoglobin A1C targets, which were unchanged during pregnancy. Second, that attainment of CGM and NICE hemoglobin A1C targets increased throughout gestation, and all targets were more likely to be achieved by real-time CGM users at 34 weeks. And third, that ADA hemoglobin A1C target achievement was independently associated with better perinatal outcomes, whereas the independent association of time below range target achievement with increased risk warrants further study. Here is the front page of the corresponding paper published last year in Diabetes Technology and Therapeutics. And last but not least, the acknowledgements, first to the participants in the concept trial, second to concept researchers and co-authors, with a special mention to Dr. Diana Tundidor, that is the first author of this paper, and third to the funders, the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation and the European Foundation for the Study of Diabetes. And that's all. Many thanks for your attention.